A quiet night in a perfect snowfall. I grew up in South Africa. Snow is not prevalent in the country that covers the southern tip of the African continent, so I had only seen snow a handful of times when I headed to Canada in late 2019. Prior to that, my experiences with the fluffy white stuff had been varied. When I was 11 years old, KwaZulu-Natal experienced a really cold winter, and rumors abounded of snow on the outskirts of the city. My father loaded my sister and me up in his yellow Chevrolet station wagon and drove us 40 minutes into the countryside to see the slushy mush that had fallen. In comparison to real snow, what we found was relatively pitiful. But we had a blast nonetheless trying to make snowballs as the slush fell apart in our gloved hands. At 14, I headed to England to spend Christmas with my godmother. And although Hampshire attempted to give me my first white Christmas, it was a meager offering. This, of course, didn't subdue my glee at seeing a dusting of snow on the ground. A few years later, when I returned to the UK before heading over to Europe, Mother Nature gave me another small taste of snow before ramping up her efforts in Switzerland. I woke to church bells and a blanket of white covering the ground, as snow lay heavy on the branches of the fir trees scattered around the house. I was swiftly taken up into the Swiss mountains to see what real snow looked like as I attempted to walk in the knee-deep, soft powder. In my previous post, I told the story of moving into my little apartment in San Antonio, Texas, which is where my next sighting occurred. It was unusual to have snow in the southern city, and it had been many years since the last snowfall, so I was caught completely off guard. A strange green light came shining through the closed blinds of my living room, causing me to get up and take a peek outside. There it was, a pretty decent snowfall. I stood there mesmerized as I watched a father and his daughter build a tiny snowman in the bed of his Ford truck. A year later, I was tickled pink to find myself walking through the snow in Colorado Springs. I admit that most of these sightings do not make the best snowflake resume, so I'm sure you can imagine how happy I was during my first winter in southern Ontario, Canada. The first snow fell on November 1st, 2019, and I couldn't wait to get out and walk in it. Despite being a small taste of what was to come, I traipsed through the smattering of white with a big grin on my frozen face. As we moved further into winter and snow became a fixture, I marveled at the pristine white landscape from my basement apartment windows. Heading out on my neighborhood walks filled me with a childlike joy that my friends had lost many decades before. People who grow up in countries where snow is abundant and winters are long seem to lose the joy of it. For most of my friends, snow means driveways that need to be cleared, cars that have to be scraped off before going anywhere, and poor visibility on the roads. When I first began my walks in the winter wonderland outside my door, I wasn't used to the cold and looked like an explorer on an expedition in the Antarctic. As my body adjusted to the new climate, I found myself taking my hat and gloves off mid-walk, enjoying the chill on my head and hands as my eyes traced the shapes of the buildings and trees hidden under freshly fallen snow. From snowy sunrises to snowy sunsets, from snow-covered fence posts to snow-covered roofs, I marveled at it all. I crunched my way down icy stairs and across a frozen lake, ticking off a bucket list item I didn't realize I even had until I tried it. From the moment the first snow fell, I was in love. Who would have guessed that ice crystals formed around tiny dust particles could bring a human soul such happiness? Then came the night. It was a year later, and the world was in the middle of a global pandemic. I had developed a weekly ritual of heading over to my American friend's home. We would sit in their basement after the kids went to bed and talk for hours. We spoke about everything: their childhoods in the US and mine in South Africa, the loneliness they felt being in the Great White North during a pandemic, unable to make a circle of friends, and the gratitude we all felt at finding solace in each other's company. I will never forget that walk on that specific Sunday evening in mid-November. For some reason, the world was so quiet that night. As I entered their street, a soft snow began to fall. There was not a breath of wind to jar the snowflakes from their path as they fell gently around me. The only sound was the crunching of snow underfoot as I made my way down the tree-lined street. The combination of snowflakes falling in perfect unison and the stillness in the air stopped me in my tracks. I must be on the set of a Christmas movie, I thought. I have to be. There's no way this is real. It's just too perfect. I looked up at the sky, at the houses that loomed around me, at the street framed with bare trees. I had walked through mild snowfalls before. This was nothing new, but the complete quiet was. It was the stillness that created such awe. I will always remember the stillness. Not a sound, no cars, no chatter, not a peep, nothing. Pure silence in a perfect snowfall. I took a deep breath as I returned to reality, a grateful smile playing on my lips. On the way to that basement on that Sunday evening, whilst the world was still, I walked through it, a perfect snowfall.